early 1920s, one invention would signal the start of the modern era and the dissemination of information around the world. For the first time, the events of history could be reported as they happened to almost anywhere on Earth. That historic invention was radio. Welcome, fellow YouTubers. The Roaring Twenties radio channel brings you another video on early radio. Hello everybody, welcome to another video on the Roaring Twenties radio YouTube channel. This documentary is about one of the most interesting characters in history. He was a successful businessman, but he was far more than that. He had a mind that was divided, half of it firmly engaged in each day of his life's work, and the other half equally as focused on the future. His life's work extended far beyond the boundaries of radio, which was not the major contributor to his fame today. But his story's beginning is firmly anchored in the early history of radio. His name was Hugo Gernsback, and the fascinating story of his life begins right after this. Hello, everyone. My apologies for the interruption, but this is the part where I shamelessly beg you to subscribe if you haven't already. And also, please hit the like button and help support my channel. Let's get back to the story. Can a man or a woman predict the future? Back in the 16th century, there lived a man named Michel de Nostradamus. Over time, he would be referred to by historians and most people as Nostradamus. His name became famous for the many predictions he made that actually ended up occurring, sometimes hundreds of years later. Over 3 centuries after the death of Nostradamus, another man was born who would become the 20th century soothsayer, following the footsteps of Nostradamus by predicting the future. His name was Hugo Gernsback. He was born in Luxembourg, August 16th in 1884, and as a boy, Gernsback would read stories by Mark Twain. Those stories drove a passion that would later lead him to leave home and emigrate to the United States. While attending college, Gernsback designed and built 2 prototypes of a dry cell battery. And after graduating, he took the prototypes with him when he emigrated to the United States at the age of 20 in 1904. While Gernsback worked on getting his battery patented, he finished work on another one of his inventions, the first mass-produced radio set for the home. In 1905, just 1 year after arriving in the United States, he founded a new company with a partner, Louis A. Cogshall. Their company would be the first mail-order radio parts business in the world. The new company was located at 32 Park Place in New York City, where they established the Electro Importing Company to sell radio components and electrical supplies by mail order. The new radio they would produce would be called the Telemco, and it would be advertised in magazines like Scientific American. The selling price was $8.50, which doesn't sound like much, but the average American's wage at the time was 22 cents an hour, $11 a week. Scientific American would publish an article about the radio in 1905. Sales were a bit slow at first, but in 1906, Gernsback decided to spend more money on advertising and placed ads in Scientific American and the New York Times. The increase in advertising paid off, and in 1906, sales for the Telemco radio took off. That same year, Gernsback applied for his battery patent. He was granted the patent on February 6, 1907. With patent in hand, Gernsback approached the Packard Motor Company about his battery. Packard bought the rights to Gernsback's invention, and Gernsback found himself in an enviable financial situation. Hugo Gernsback's electro importing business grew quickly and started distribution of a 64-page catalog nationwide. One of his customers was Lee DeForest, a name many of you may be familiar with. By 1908, Gernsback was living the good life, plenty of money, fancy clothes, and dining at the best restaurants. In 1909, he married a woman named Rose Harvey. Gernsback would end up getting married 2 more times and raising 3 children. The road to success often has potholes, and for Gernsback, it was no different. His partnership with Cogshall ended in 1909. Gernsback took out an advertisement in the New York Times in an attempt to find another partner. He found one, and his name was Milton Himes. Soon afterwards, Electro Importing moved to 231 Fulton Street in New York and opened the company's first retail stores. Gernsback started a magazine called Modern Electrics, which featured articles and information on the latest breakthroughs in the electrical field. In the December 1909 edition, he wrote an article about television. He was one of the first to use the term, possibly the first. Gernsback was always thinking about the future. Hugo Gernsback was a man of boundless energy. With so much going on in his life in 1909, he still found the time to establish the Wireless Association of America, or WAOA. Within a year, the WAOA had over 10,000 members. The association played a large role in the writing of the Radio Act of 1912. In 1911, Gernsback found he had some empty pages to fill in one of the editions of Modern Electrics. He decided to write a story, oddly entitled Ralph 124C41 Plus. He ended the story with a cliffhanger and ended up adding 12 more installments of the story in future issues of his magazine. The story was a romance with science fiction, and it was set in the year 2660. The book contained predictions about the future. The story would later come out as a book, and well over a century later, it's still in publication. The Electrical Experimenter was another of Gernsback's magazines. The magazine was focused on the future of science and electrical advancements. Gernsback wrote another series about the future in his magazine called Baron Munchausen's New Scientific Adventures. In 1915, Gernsback would start his own publishing company, Experimenters Publishing. The notice of the company's formation was announced in the New York Times. His partners in the venture were Milton Himes and Gernsback's brother, Sidney. The beginning of World War I was terrible news for the world and bad news for Gernsback's business. The government banned all amateur radio, which left Gernsback stuck with a fortune worth of radio parts he couldn't sell. But the setback was no match for Gernsback's business skills and imagination. He designed kits based on parts he had in stock for building different, fun electrical gadgets for young electrical amateurs. By 1919, the ban on amateur radio was over, and Gernsback launched the first magazine devoted to radio, Radio Amateur News. In 1920, the name was shortened to Radio News. The magazine stayed in publication for over 50 years. By 1924, Gernsback had 5 different magazines in publication. They were Practical Electrics, Radio News, Your Body, Science and Invention, and Radio International. His publishing company, Experimenter Publishing, had become a cash cow. Hugo Gernsback's writings about the future caught the attention of many leading scientists of the day: Edison, Marconi, Tesla, and Goddard. Gernsback would meet and get to know all of them, with Tesla being his favorite. In 1925, Gernsback found a partner named Robert W. DeMott, and together they started a new radio station, WRNY. The station began broadcasting on June 12, 1925. Broadcasting at 1160 kilocycles with a 500-watt transmitter, the station was located in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York, while the transmitter was located in Coytesville, New Jersey. Lee DeForest was the second speaker on the station's first day of broadcasting. In 1927, WRNY added a shortwave station that broadcast at 9,700 kilohertz. Back in that era, it was common for radio stations to also broadcast on shortwave, greatly increasing the station's audience. Its call sign was 2XAL. Later, the station's call sign was changed to W2XAL. The station could be heard thousands of miles away. The station had listeners as far away as Australia. As time went by, Gernsback talked more and more about the future and little else. His predictions were not just ideas he dreamed up without any basis in scientific fact. His predictions extrapolated from the technology of the day. He made the predictions of the future, and his accuracy on many things has turned out to be pretty amazing. Gernsback predicted future inventions like microfilm, computer dating, night baseball, cell phones, virtual reality, doctor appointments over the phone, now known as telemedicine, and flat screen TV. These were just some of his prognostications. He also predicted making phone calls on airplanes. The feedback Gernsback received from his readers in response to his predictions made him think there might be many readers interested in science based fictional stories. He tested the theory by issuing an all science fiction edition of his Science and Invention magazine, which was formerly called Electrical Experimenter. The issue was a hit, and readers wanted more. Gernsback responded by starting a new magazine, Amazing Stories. The magazine's motto was Extravagant Fiction Today, Cold Fact Tomorrow, and publishing began in April of 1926. Gernsback's accomplishments continued to pile up. In mid August of 1928, his radio station, WRNY, began broadcasting something you wouldn't expect from a radio station: television. A man named John Galoso, who worked for the Pilot Electric Company, had developed a form of mechanical television. His system used a 24-inch, 48-line scanning disc that rotated at 240 RPM. Gernsback published drawings for a receiver in his magazine, Science and Invention. WRNY would broadcast 5 minutes of television each day to an estimated 2,000 watchers. An August 21st, 1928 broadcast schedule of WRNY showed 9 shows were to be broadcast that day. The broadcasts of WRNY television preceded Philo Farnsworth television by a decade. Gernsback's accomplishments were overshadowed by the fact that his publishing company had begun spouting red ink all over its books. To save his company, he was forced to cede control of Experimenter Publishing in exchange for credit to pay the bills. The words, edited by Hugo Gernsback, disappeared from the cover of his most successful magazine, Radio News, in May of 1929. The company would go on, and its flagship magazine, Radio News, would survive. Gernsback would be an executive with the reorganized company, but he was no longer in control. It's possible Hugo Gernsback's ways of doing business may have led to his own downfall. He was accused of having shady business practices like underpaying his writers or not paying them at all. 2 of his most famous writers at the time, H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, referred to him as Hugo the Rat. Gernsback was described as corruptible and sleazy by novelist Barry Malzberg. Malzberg stated that Gernsback drew a salary of $100,000 a year from his company, which was a huge salary for a company of that size, while stiffing his writers. Gernsback was far from through with publishing magazines, though, and he started 2 new ones. The Great Depression forced him to merge the 2 magazines into one, Wonder Stories, which he published until 1936. Hugo Gernsback's work was not limited to magazines. He wrote a 12-part novel with an odd title, Ralph 124C41 Plus. It was first printed in serialized form, beginning with the April 1911 edition of Modern Electrics, and was reprinted in book form in 1925. The book's title was a numerical play on words. Decoded, it meant 1 2 for C for many, the many expressed numerically as 1 plus. Gernsback's second book, also first released in serialized form, was titled The Scientific Adventures of Baron Munchausen in 1928. 3 decades would pass before his last novel, Ultimate World, was written in 1958. It would be another 13 years, 1971 to be exact, 4 years after the author had passed, before it was to be published. The critics had trashed a preview of it in 1958, and publishers were in no hurry to print it. Hugo Gernsback died on August 19, 1967, at Roosevelt Hospital, today known as Mount Sinai West Hospital. His cause of death was listed as natural causes. His body was donated to Cornell University for the advancement of medical science. He was survived by his wife, Mary. Hugo Gernsback was most famous for his contributions to science fiction. His early publications also contributed greatly to the field of electronics. He drew the attention of the masses to both and stirred the imaginations of millions over the years. He was a man with many flaws, but his many accomplishments in life cannot be denied. Before I end this video, I thought you'd like to hear from Hugo Gernsback himself.
The George Washington of science fiction, the father of science fiction, is generally acknowledged to be Hugo Gernsback. Hugo Gernsback published in April 1926 the first science fiction magazine in the history of the world. It was called Amazing Stories. This magazine was a commercial success right from the beginning, and it was fortunate that it was, because Gernsback did more than publish merely the first magazine. He established the ground rules for what is true science fiction.
Hugo Gernsback's rule for writing science fiction is to start with a scientific premise on which everyone agrees. Now 80 years old, he opened the first radio shop in New York in 1909. In 1911, he wrote a story describing with diagrams the basic principles of radar. He recalls a meeting with Sir Watson Watt, Britain's wartime pioneer of radar.
Sir Watson Watts, he called me up one day and wanted to see me. He said he had read my book and he couldn't possibly believe that I was first with radar, and he wanted to see the original story in Modern Electrics in 1911. It was then that he claimed that I was the inventor of radar and not he, although I had nothing to do with radar and the Battle of Britain. He was the one who did that, and he still should be thought of as being the first one to use it practically in this way, which I did not do.
Gernsback has published thousands of science fiction stories since 1911. How do scientists react to his ideas?
In the early days, that is before 1930, there was a terrible lot of skepticism. Today, most scientists take me seriously.
An idea that he would like taken seriously is a new use for television.
In times to come, the physician will have, by electronics, some way and means to get the patient's temperature, his respiration, and all the other facts by radio and electronics in such a way that he will know by glancing at a chart exactly what the patient is doing, how he feels, what is happening to him, and so forth. He can then prescribe over the telephone if he wishes, or call him up and tell his wife or his father what he should do. This is teledoctoring at its best. And I would say within 20 years it should come about. Anything you can think of that is being done today in the space age, we have done before in some way or another in my former magazines.
Hello, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the latest mini documentary here on the Roaring Twenties Radio YouTube channel. I look forward to seeing all of you here again very soon. So until then, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.